everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Let Me Introduce You podcast. This is episode 6. We are talking about Achilles thing. I am Jen. This is Adarian. And let's talk about what the Achilles tendon actually is.
It's a good spot, but go ahead.
Good starting point, right? It's the strongest tendon in the body. It's formed by two muscles of the lower limb, the gastrocnemius and soleus, and it attaches under the foot. Do you have any other thoughts about the Achilles tendon?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Well, the first question comes up is this: why is it the strongest tendon in the body? You know what I mean? But at the same time, it seems like it easily ruptures. No other tendon seems to rupture as easy as that one does.
Well, so Achilles ruptures are really rare, actually.
Yeah, but when they happen, you see, it could be something as simple. I step back and it ruptured.
Right. It's true.
It's not you wouldn't do anything crazy when it ruptured. You just I step back, boom, it ruptured.
Yes, and for the record, it's 6 to 37 people rupture their Achilles for every 100,000 people.
Yeah. It's
So it's a small amount.
But it's like, But back to this, why is it the strongest? And I think when we start talking about structures, me personally, I think it's the strongest because of the windlass mechanism. Because technically it's being pulled in two different directions.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you have the windlass mechanism of the foot. So when the toes flex, you have the plantar fascia, it pulls on the calcaneus. Which means that the Achilles tendon is being pulled on at the same time.
Yeah.
Now, if my knee flexes forward, guess what? It's being pulled on. So it's being pulled on from two different directions at the same time, which is why I think it's the strongest. It has to handle multi-directional pulls.
This makes sense, which is going to put a lot of tension in the area, correct?
Right.
So it has to be able to withstand the tension. Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like taffy. When you pull taffy, both ends are pulling on it. Right. Or something like that. Usually, if you stretch a rubber band, you hold one end and one end, but you don't pull from both directions and stuff like that. So, and the other part too, because when you stand on something, it becomes almost like a rod, But you can see one of the cool things you see about the Achilles as it move about is at some point in time when it's in what I call a passive state. It's like this thick band. And then all of a sudden becomes this thin band, as you go through as you go through movement and things like that, But that's one of the cool things about it. Watch it be thick, and then watch it be thin, and then watch it be thick, watch it be thin. So it's going through these transitions and things like that. But the other part too is, when it's kind of thick, you can tell like on athletes, it's like a little rod. It's a rod, and you see like as they move about how it flexes this way. You can see it trying to keep everything in alignment. So I think that's part of it too. It's just that I think part of it being strong is that thickness to keep everything in alignment.
That makes sense. So what's its function then? Is it just that?
I think it's just that. It's just one is alignment and one is I got this windlass mechanism thing that needs to work. Because think about it. Let's just cut the plantar fascia and let's cut the Achilles. What does the heel do then?
It dangles, right? Like it doesn't have any.
It's gonna dangle. So it stops it. So it stops what? When you pick your foot off the ground, it stops it from dangling.
That makes sense. So is that allowing it? So when the foot collides with the ground, then and the Achilles, what does it do during the collision? Is it compressing and holding tension?
It's holding tension because at that point in time, when the biggest thing, I think the biggest thing is when people do toe raises, you watch it kind of bend. You go too far in a sense. You watch it kind of bend, But part of that is when you hit the ground, you're straight. And nothing's happening yet. But then you get this rapid movement. If I'm gonna, what people call absorb, but it's not really absorb. I'm gonna get out of the way. I'm getting out of the way of this thing, this collision that's moving through the body. I want to get out of the way or make it take a longer path through the body and everything. So at that point in time, what happens? The knee moves forward, and And this is the biggest thing. This is the biggest thing where I think the mistake is that we don't separate out tibia movement from the foot.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is this here. If you can have dorsiflexion of the tibia and dorsiflexion of the foot.
Yes.
You have plantar flexion of the foot, but you have plantar flexion of the tibia.
Right.
So one of those they call is basically the same movement.
Mm-hmm.
They say dorsiflex. And so dorsiflex would be the tibia movement or the foot movement, but it can't, but see what I'm saying? The foot has its own movement and the tibia has its own movement. And so that's what the Achilles is trying to deal with, these two movements.
Yes.
You know? So I think that's just one of those things that happens. You have this movement, tibia's moving, and at the same time the foot's moving. And what happens, and so what happens when the foot is moving, like you're in the air, foot's moving down, tibia is moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
I got to keep this relationship, you know, because if there's no tension on that Achilles,
mm-hmm.
then what happens to these next two, these muscles that are connected at the chain? You know, what happens to the gastroc at the tibia? I mean, at the femur. Right. What happens to the soleus? What happens if there's slack in the system now? So part of that is like the scales being balanced. It's that thing that makes sure the scales stay balanced.
This makes sense. And when you look at something like, for instance, a really commonly prescribed, for lack of a better word, exercise for the Achilles region is heel drops, right?
Yeah, right.
Which stretches the Achilles quite a lot.
Right.
And then you lift it up. So the theory, I think, being that you're strengthening the Achilles through a full range of motion.
Right. Well, think about like right now I'm sitting on a chair, you know.
Right.
And so what does the Achilles stop? It stops the foot can only dangle so far.
Right.
Because the Achilles is there. You know, it's there. It's only gonna dangle so far before it stops because the Achilles there. Now what do people do? They try to go too far, like you said. So, but that's in the air stuff. And then you have on the ground stuff. So you have these two things. In the air stuff, there's only, and so if I'm hopping in the air, I don't want my foot to flip too far back. Because I got, so if I'm hopping in the air, I'm doing these things like running, I don't want my foot to dangle this far. I want, so it's controlling the range of the movement of this complex ankle joint in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so you go through that part there. Then you talk about when I'm on the ground. Now, if I'm on the ground, once again, I got two movements happening. Because technically what? The foot is being pushed up as the tibia is going this way. So I have these two things that are trying to move towards each other, you know? But what happens is this here. Once you go far enough, what happens? The heel comes off the ground.
Yes. Although
so once you go far enough, it's going to...
If you've trained yourself to keep the heel on the ground because you've been doing certain exercises where you keep the heel on the ground, that's going to slow the whole system down, won't it?
Down. Right. It's going to slow the whole system down. So you have this, so it's part of this coordination sequence of things that you go so far. Just like we talked about with, you know, when we're watching the lifters and the ones that have long gastroc, how they can do this so easy. Yeah. You know, and if you have a short gastroc, you won't squat very deep because you won't get the range. It's just not going to move that far. Right. You know, so it's controlling. So it's also that, like I said, it's just the equalizer, the balance of the system. It's making we're going to control range. We're going to control this. We're going to control the speed of movement. We're going to control a lot of stuff that's at the Achilles. You know, makes sense. But what do people want to do? They want to stretch that thing out. And a lot of times people think they're stretching it. You can see it is actually bending. It's not stretching. It's actually being bent.
Which is nuts when you look at some of the videos. Like you've sent me stuff and you can see it. You can see it actually bending, and you think that can't be good. Right.
You know. And so then think about this here when people do calf stretches, because calf stretches do really hit the muscle, you know. Right. But what are you doing? You're elongating this muscle in a sense. Why? Because you're about to jack up the Achilles again. So the system is kind of cool until people really just start messing with it, like, no, leave it kind of alone. You know. Right. Unless you like a ballet dancer, different story again. We're gonna see the Achilles bunch up because when you get on their toes and point things like that. They got the long gastroc. They need the gastroc to work because they want to turn the hamstrings off. as they do flips. So if you're doing some specialty like that, okay. But if you get general population, leave that thing alone.
That makes sense. And from like a performance standpoint, if we take an exercise like heel raises, which if you rupture your Achilles or if you have Achilles tendinopathy, this is the exercise that's given for return to play. If you're a runner, this is the exercise that's given for prehab. So even if you don't have any Achilles issues, you're supposed to do heel raises, right?
Right.
Is that going to actually improve anything performance related?
No, it's going to strain it even more. Because a lot of times when the first time people really recognize they have an Achilles pain is when they try to press the big toe into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point in time, you're stressing it out.
Got it.
Because you got to remember what's happening is this thing is your foot's being pushed down and you're trying to press your toe up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's caught in between these two actions. And it's the strain point of that, So a lot of times people start to feel that because they're trying to stay on the big toe, and they're like, that's not. At that point in time, you got these other. It's like a rod, and so it's being strained in a sense. But the other part too is people don't understand the rotation part been taken out. That you have one rotation, but you need another rotation is going to make this work. If you look at calf muscle, the soleus is also the pinnate muscle, just like the glutes, the pinnate muscle. They kind of fan out and stuff like that. But the other thing too is what they never put back into the rehab process is the ability to yaw with the soleus. Mm-hmm. Because what do people think the soleus and gastroc does? They think that it can raise the heel off the ground. It can't do that. It only pulls the heel off the ground once you hit in range. Once the tickets move far enough forward, but guess what? What do they say to people? If that happens too soon, you have a defect. We got to fix the defect.
Right.
No, your range is over. So if that's your range, and they say it can't happen too soon. It can only happen once the tibia has hit range for that movement, and then the heel comes off the ground with it. Why? Because of this Achilles thing that's attached to this heel thing that's attached to this foot thing.
Right. Which isn't how anybody thinks of it. And the other thing with heel raises, which I always find really interesting, is they're done standing up. I mean, maybe you put a slight bend in your knee, but it's straight legged, and rarely is that the action that you need.
Right, and the thing about it is what you're training is those flexors and extension muscles
of the foot, right?
Of the foot, it's going through the toes and things like that. Because technically it's a reverse action. As you try to press down, the ground's not going to move. You come up, but it's not the gastroc or soleus doing that. It's those other. Now, you also have anterior posterior tibialis. They can help with this process too, but it's a sequence again. Where you can start, the posterior anterior tibialis can start to raise the foot up, and then the extension muscles, flexion muscles can finish the moving off. But it's not the gastroc soleus that's doing that action.
Oh, which I don't think people realize that.
Yeah, it can't, because you basically trace it out, it can't do it.
Right.
So because even think about the plantar fascia wants to hold it in place. So you have this heel thing that doesn't want to move. It doesn't really want to. It doesn't, So you get into that, but yeah, if you look at the structure of it and everything, you go, oh, okay, then, and so, but people don't look at that. But if you look at what is attached to, the gastroc goes from the heel to the femur, and there's a joint in there somewhere. And then where's the soleus go? It doesn't even cross any. It doesn't cross anything else, because it goes to what? The side of what? The fibula.
Yeah.
So how's it gonna pull on the fibula to pull it? It's like.
Right. It can't really.
It can't really. It can't. It can't. But everybody says no. They say it's a jumpy muscle. The reason it's a jumpy muscle. This is why the gastroc is a jumpy muscle, because the speed at which it can pull the femur back.
Right, which is very fast because of its attachment point.
Right, and so you got to think about it. If your hips are sitting here and the femur gets snatched back, that means this end gets popped up rapidly now. So yes, it can be a jump muscle, but not because it's working through the foot. It's working because it's pulling on the femur.
Right, which makes it a shorter lever arm, which that all makes really good sense.
Right. So, and what do you see when people jump? You see the tibia goes what? Moves one way, then comes the other way rapidly. That's another plyometric effect. It's gonna go.
Right.
It doesn't. Because like I said, what's being lifted, what's being shortened. You know. And
Right.
so you go through this thing where you go here, and then all of a sudden it snaps back. When it snaps back, you go up.
You go
But
up.
it's not, and you see the foot hanging because you left the ground, not
Right.
because you pressed the ground.
No, totally. So instead of like a heel raise, for instance, what could one do that would be more impactful for training that action of pulling the tibia back?
Well, that action will not. Well, we got two actions to pull the tibia back and pull the femur back. So
Right.
so the gastrocs pulling on the femur, the hamstrings pulling on the tibia.
Tibia, yeah.
And think about, and so what you have to do is you have to let, once again, for this to happen, the heel has to come off the ground because you need space for it to move back into.
Right.
You know, you need some space for it to move back into. So at that point in time, with the foot locked into place, and that's the beauty of the foot, you have these muscles that are countering each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all these extension flexor muscles that are holding the foot in place, which holds the foot in place, which now gives the gastroc something to work against.
Right.
That's why the heel doesn't have to be on the ground for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's being held in place by these other muscles that are holding the foot in place. And now it's going to pull back. If the heel's on the ground, saying it's going to pull down the femur, and the femur is going to flip you the other way. So at the same time, then you see the hips move up. Hips move up, pulls on the tibia, it moves backwards into lock into place.
Mm-hmm.
So the Achilles is not doing what people think it's doing.
Right.
You know, just because it's not pulling the foot off the ground. It's
Right.
more or less of an anchor and balance to hold everybody in alignment. You know, it's kind of like, you know, like when you lean over too far and you start doing
Mm-hmm.
this, that's kind of what it's doing. You've gone too far and it's trying to reel you back in.
Right.
And it gives you just enough so you can stop and whoop, come back the other way.
So I guess that does kind of lead to the question everybody wants. Probably, well, I don't know if everybody wants to know it. I want to know it. So do we need to train the Achilles?
No. No, the
Okay.
Achilles is going to act. What you have to train, you got to go back to training the muscle. So the Achilles is reacting to movement.
Right.
You know, and definitely fast movement.
Right.
You know, the other part, because, you know, the other part too is what the soleus doing. So I gotta put the soleus back in there. I gotta put this foot back. I gotta put some other things back in there to really do this. But I don't need to train the Achilles. I gotta train some other movements.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for instance, I gotta train myself to do what? Collapse.
Okay.
I want to train myself to collapse, and so that's a movement that I'm gonna train. And when I collapse, what happens? Boom. Tibia moves. Achilles gets tension on it, and we know if tension comes first, muscles, you know, we know through rotation. That's why we like rotations. Rotations puts tension at the end point, which is a tendon, and the tendon rotates, tightens up, tensions, whatever the case may be. Now the muscle has something to pull with.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know these things. This is so if you're gonna do anything, put rotations back in your movement patterns, and it automatically happens. You don't have to train; just put the rotations back in. So that's like when people, you know, say as in collapse, use the soleus to rotate downward. You know,
Right.
I just saw and I know people can't see this, but some people may see this that watch this. But can I share screen real quick? I know people can't see this. I'm gonna put it up anyways because we have a conversation. You can see it. You go, oh.
And I'll walk everybody through it. They can't see it, so I'll explain what's going on.
So this here is. I hope.
And for people who may not have read the book, yaw is a rotational movement, much like a top. So if you imagine a top spinning, that spinning action of the top is the yaw. So when Adarian mentions the yaw of the soleus, that means that the soleus is actually rotating around the tibia in that way, correct?
Yes.
I explained that all appropriately.
So let me find it and then let me put it up over here. I'm trying to I hope this works out. If I can do this. Where's the video at? Oh, I know what I can do. Oh, I forgot I can do this. Got it. Sometimes y'all think yourself. So it's coming up. So, and so we're gonna show you the different activities going on. And so like I said, a lot of people, you know, you'll see it and you go, oh, okay. And so, and you gotta look how deep this person is into what they're doing. And so it's a sprinter and everything. And so, and so I can share screen.
You can share screen. You are co-host. So again, I'll explain to everybody who's listening to this what's happening.
So can you see the video?
I can see the video. So we've got a sprinter coming off the blocks.
Yeah, so let me stop it. And so this is what we're talking about. Let's go back here, just so you can see. See that hamstring?
Yes, the one on the right side, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I know people can't, but as we talk about this, so think about this thing's running right to here, you know, and then who's running right to here? See?
So Adarian drew a line from the ischial tuberosity to the knee where the hamstring attaches. So you can see the line of the hamstring, and then from the knee to the heel. So you can see where the gastroc is running.
So you have these things running and meeting right there. But now this is the other fun part. So let's go a little bit forward, you know, just because here in this area, you know, you got that one there, but not much.
And you're referring to the
Gastroc.
The gastroc, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And
so just the tone of the gastroc you can see very clearly. And the gastroc and the hamstring meet at the knee.
But now look on this side.
So it flipped over to the left side. The left leg is pretty straight because he's already off the block. And the hamstring, you can see it thinning where it meets behind the
and that's,
tibia.
Remember that's a what? That a tendon or is that the muscle? I think that's more tendon.
I was about to say, I think that's the tendon, yeah.
I think hamstrings have more tendons, yeah. So and which way is his foot pointing?
And his foot is rotating outward.
Yeah. And so then you see, you know, these guys here.
Right.
But
and these guys meaning the heads of the gastroc, right?
That's right. Yeah. And so what people would normally think is the hamstring is being pulled on right now, but it's really being stretched right now. As the hip moves forward, it's being rapidly stretched.
Oh. That
and
makes sense.
And so yeah, so I have and it has to stay there because I don't want the tibia to move backwards. The tibia moves backwards, it kills everything. So I need to hold the tibia in place so that this other rotation can take place, but this becomes the other fun part. You know, if we go back to this picture here.
So now both feet are on the blocks. He's in the down position. Yeah. He has not come off yet.
And so then look at all his activity.
And you can see you can see a lot of tone in the hamstring, like a lot.
Yeah, and none here yet.
And yeah, nothing in the gastroc.
So, you know.
So basically this is just illustrating when the muscles are when there's more tension on them, because you can see it.
Yeah. And so right now you look at the Achilles. If you look at the Achilles, there's not much happening here.
Right. So the Achilles with the feet on the blocks before he comes off, there's not a whole lot going on.
Yeah. So knees are down. Knees are almost running parallel to the track. Feet. So not a whole lot going on. But you see in the upper body, like, holy cow. But what they're about to be stretched.
Right.
So then if you go here. Who's gonna?
So when you stretch them, you can see, you can see, you can even on this guy, I don't know who this is, but you can see both heads of the gastroc. It's actually super cool as the Achilles gets stretched.
So see the rod of the Achilles now? This is what we're talking about. So it's a rod right now. It's just one strong rod because it has the whole place. The foot has the whole place. It has the whole place as this tibia stays in place so that the upper leg can be moved forward rapidly.
Right.
So, and then here,
so his foot's back on the ground. And there's less activity there now, right?
Less.
Yeah.
But who's this guy right here?
Isn't that this?
Tibialis posterior.
Tibialis
because
posterior.
it's
Whoa.
So you
can see the tone in the tibialis posterior when his right foot comes back to the ground right before he transitions to moving forward.
Now they're both becoming highly active.
Yeah.
And this is as he's gone now. That's a flat foot there.
Yep. That's a very flat foot.
Yeah. And what do you see? You see that, and you see these
hamstring,
guys
and you see gastroc.
And so and Achilles like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
We're not needed at this point in time.
Right.
But as soon as he goes, look at it now. As soon
as he moves over it, yeah.
What's off the ground now? Look at it.
Yep. That's cool.
So what is this thing doing? There you go again. It's a balancing act.
Mm-hmm.
As his foot turns, it's a balancing act. So I know people that couldn't see that, but I think you do a good job explaining it to them as they go through it. But we see when it's on, when it's off, when it's working, when it's not working, and it's working more when people don't think it's working less when people thought it was working.
Right. And by off, Adarian just means less tone, because no muscle is ever truly off.
Right, less tone to it, but we can see, like when because we can see here, this is the fun part. Here, when, like I said, with the gastroc, you can see that
so the left leg is straight.
Yeah, and it's there. It's a rod right now because they're doing what? The gastrocs are doing. Yeah, it's just holding. It's a holding.
Yeah, and this is the basically the last phase of the foot being on the ground. It's about to lift off.
Right. So it's not pulling the heel up like people think. It's just kind of there.
Right.
So it's
which is super interesting because if you look at it from that perspective, that would definitely change one's approach to programming for that area.
Right.
For function and performance. Because even though that was a sprinting video, if you look at normal everyday activities like walking up stairs or walking down the stairs, you're going to see similar things.
So yeah, well, I think that's why. Like I think I did a video yesterday. I was sitting on a motorcycle. And I got to move this thing to weigh 756 pounds. I weigh 200 pounds. It's 956 pounds. I got to move now. And then I put a slight drag on the brake. And the motorcycle is easy to move on the wheels because it's going to roll. But even they put a slight drag on the brake. And if you and the thing about things that roll is they're not rolling, they're not balanced.
Right.
So if I roll it, it's easy to keep it. That's easy. But as soon as I put that slight hit on the brakes, it becomes unstable. Now I got to balance 1,000 pounds and move 1,000 pounds at the same time. Different story again versus just doing toe raises.
Right.
And that's what you do when you're moving. You're trying to balance and move at the same time. That's what we got to, it's not a stand here, let me do nothing thing, it's balance. And that's what you see with this guy here. What happened is he stumbled. And that's why you see all that activity. He was running and he stumbled.
Okay.
And that's all activity came because what he was trying to do, move and balance at the same time.
Makes sense.
But for the most part, on activity on the Achilles, you see it just kind of thick and holding. I got to hold steady so these other things above me can move.
Yep. That makes sense. Okay.
You know, because think about being in this position and it pulls the foot up. It's going to turn your knee down too far.
So if the other things above it aren't moving, if they're not doing their job, then that would probably put more tension on the Achilles and ask it to do something that it doesn't necessarily designed to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just like we saw in the one frame, how you see the posterior tibialis is lit up just as much as it's lit up.
Right.
You know, because it's also trying to do what? I got to stabilize this foot. I got to, you know.
Yeah.
So, that'd be anterior, one of those. Anyways, I'll have to look back. We may have to correct that, which one it is. You know, but we know, like I said, you see it like, okay, this thing. But a lot of times, I think too, what we see from when we think muscles are working or something's working is being rapidly stretched.
Right.
And it's in an eccentric phase, not a concentric phase. But we see it like that, we go, ooh, because if you look at that same thing, you could be thinking what? Using his hamstring to pull to go ahead and pull his heel up. Yeah. Versus no, his hamstring's being rapidly stretched right now. Because we see the tendon, because if we look at that again, one more time. Let me look at this one more time. I'll show you something. And I know people, like I said, people can't see it, but they just have to deal with it. So if we look at this again, and what do we say? Tendon's got to do something first. And
we've got left foot off the block, right foot still on the block.
Yeah, and so who we see? We see these tendons first. Because if you look here, you see tendons.
So we're talking about the tendons in the lateral aspect of the thigh and the tendons in the posterior aspect of the thigh.
Yeah, so if you see the tendons are already kind of reacting. The muscle, not really reacting yet.
Right.
You know, so same thing here. What do you see? You see tendon reacting first, muscle not yet.
And now we're down in the Achilles. So we see the Achilles tendon reacting first. The gastroc and the soleus aren't reacting yet.
Yeah, but that's to the movement. If we go back, let me start catching when he's sitting back in this position here. So see right there?
Yes.
There, but not there. It's there, but not there.
Oh, so this is different than when he's in the starting position on the blocks. You can see the tension on the Achilles, but you don't see the same level of tension on the hamstring tendon.
Yeah, and then if you look at his other leg, you see.
And the other leg, you actually, but you see the hamstring popping on the other leg.
Yeah, but the Achilles and they're not doing anything.
But the Achilles is not doing anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So now his right leg, as we go through this, if I can just catch it one frame. See, now look what's happening. Now we see more as the gastroc starts to come online.
Right. And this is when the left foot, so he's just starting to accelerate off the blocks. His left foot's just left. The right foot's about to leave.
I'm just trying to get it. So, all right, that's the best I can do.
That's good.
So, yeah. And so here's another good one. Like this is the last one I'll do. But this is another good one. Because you see gastroc, Achilles, thick rod.
So this is left foot on the ground right after he's left the blocks.
Yeah, but that's his foot initially coming in contact with the ground again. So it's ready to handle what's about to happen. And like I said, this is, once again. So I think that's part of it too, is we have to think about, we have to reverse the thinking.
Yeah.
And this and think about, when is it really working? Well, it's probably really working when things are being rapidly moved away from it versus it pulling the foot off the ground, things like that, and what it's doing so that things above it, so that the hamstring quads, those guys can work. It's got to be a strong anchor at that time to keep the foot in place and everything. And you don't want the foot to move up anymore.
Right.
You want it to stay right there. So
interesting. Okay. Well, this was good. Little Achilles tendon function and analysis. Maybe that's what I'll call this particular episode. And I know I promised Jenn splints, but I got really sidetracked by the Achilles stuff, which is why we did not do shin splints today. It was my fault.
So I think, like I said, with people, it can be a jump muscle if it works the femur, not if it works the foot.
Right. And stretching your Achilles is not a good idea.
No, I think it's the balancing act. Balancing act. So yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Adarian. And if any of you listening, if you have any ideas, comments, suggestions, or reviews, please feel free to drop them in the comments section. And if you have any questions, you can hit me up directly and I will do my best to address them in a future podcast.
Yeah.
All right.
Because I imagine most people will go, what do you mean can't pull the heel off? What do you mean doesn't lift the heel up?
Right. It's a different way of thinking about it, you know?
Yeah. Different way. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.